See that with cows also. They've got these huge bellies. And this huge belly is essentially associated with a raw vegetarian diet. Because you need a larger length of the gut to be able to digest it, and a large amount of the digestion is actually carried out by bacteria. The moment we discovered the utility of fire and the ability to pre-digest food with the help of fire, the length of the gut does not require to be the same.
Correct.
A flat tummy is because of a technological invention, and that is fire.
Correct.
In a lot of the tribal population is a sickle cell trait. And the sickle cell trait is something that provided some populations with a survival advantage.
Yes.
And that survival advantage also malaria. And that is something that a lot of people do not understand about evolution. And therefore, when today they ask as to, has evolution stopped? It hasn't.
No.
This professor of ours who used to tell us that, there would come a time where the thumb is going to become so prominent because that is what people are using all the time. Whether it be for gaming consoles, whether it be for messaging or anything like that, most of people are just doing this.
Yeah.
And therefore, this hand is going to evolve further.
Pollution in Delhi, does it have effect on the brain health?
And the moment your rate of respiration changes, suppose there is too much of pollution and you're not able to breathe properly, that creates a lot of washout, and that can affect the concentrations in the CSF as well. Like in Delhi, if you stay, you can be guaranteed that every end of October to beginning of December, you are going to be in a gas house.
Yeah.
In Nazi Germany, gas chambers would be operational only for a few hours and the people would be dead. Here we are in this operational gas chamber for nearly 1.5 months.
Yeah.
Now, what are going to be the effects of that? Probably another generation would be answering that question. And blood pressure is, especially in the bipedal animals that we are, is very important to pump that blood into the brain.
True.
So that 120 millimeters of mercury from the heart is very important to maintain the circulation of blood in the brain. The moment the pressure goes down, the brain's perfusion and its ability to get oxygen and blood nutrition also goes down. And therefore, it kind of starts shutting down. So one of the first things that we do when a person faints is to just check for their pulse and their BP to check as to whether they've got low blood pressure.
Okay.
And if they have low blood pressure, just keep them lying down. Never try to lift them up.
Can we maintain a good, healthy brain?
And if I tell you that a large amount of your brain is just fat and water, that means you should only be taking fat and water to maintain brain health. Now, no one in the world is going to tell you that that is a healthful diet. Person who had brain blindness, wherein the receptors and everything, the retina, the eye receptors and the pathways are fine, but there's a portion of the brain that died off or did not develop properly, and therefore they have a cerebral kind of blindness.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Somnath Show. In this episode, I am immensely honored to have a very distinguished guest, Professor Tony George Jacob from the prestigious All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. As a renowned professor of anatomy, he spent years exploring the intricacies of the human body, from the delicate structure of the hand to the complex working of the brain. With a deep understanding of human anatomy and its evolutionary history, Professor Tony will take us on to a fascinating journey through the human form, revealing the intricate relationship between structure, function, and evolution. From the opposable thumb that enables us to grasp and manipulate objects, to the cerebral cortex that underlies our cognitive abilities, we will explore the remarkable adaptations that have shaped the human body over millions of years. So please join us as we delve into the wonders of human anatomy and discover the intricate and fascinating story of how our bodies came to be the way we are today. So let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Tony. Thank you, sir, for your time and welcome to this platform. As you are, sir, from the, as an expert in anatomy, so my podcast questions mostly will revolve around the fascinating human body, right?
Sure.
And when it is human body, we know it's one of the most complex system or complex machinery which we can encounter, which we can think of. So in that, what are the most fascinating or interesting, complex at the same time interesting organs which are there in our body?
Interesting question. Uh, can I not pick one and at least a few of them?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So, one of the most complicated structures is definitely the brain. And it's fascinating to study it, where this random collection of neurons has so much purpose, from thinking to imagination to creativity, memory, everything is related to that. But something that creates a lot more interest are the receptors that take that information into the brain. And two very important ones that I consider to be extremely important are the eye and the ear. Extremely complex structures. And they're designed in such a way that just light or sound energy is converted into what we appreciate all around us, whether it be visualization. And today is the generation that is extremely visual and audio.
Yeah.
And these two receptors that we have are extremely complicated, and the way they convert energy into some meaningful information and how that is perceived by the brain itself is a study unto itself.
Yeah.
But another very simple organ that we often take for granted
Hmm.
is actually the hand, or a part of the body that we take for granted is actually the hand. A lot of the evolution that we have undergone has been very often secondary to the development of the hand as we have today.
Oh, wow.
So your ability to hold things, the
Hmm.
ability to reach out after we develop the stance,
Hmm.
this bipedal stand compared to being on all four limbs has changed a lot in the human anatomy. So the fact that our hands are free to move about, but it has also come with its own baggage. Anyway, that's a different matter altogether. But yes, this is something that is extremely beautifully planned and beautifully architectured in such a way that it makes its functioning so important. And we explore the world with it to a large extent, much like the other animals do with their noses. So
Oh,
the whiskers that a rat or a mouse or a dog or a cat has, and the sense of smell that they have,
mm,
and the way that they use their nose to even touch things is essentially because all four limbs are engaged with the ground.
correct.
And therefore, a lot of their exploration happens with their head. In our case, a lot of the exploration actually happens with our eyes, our ears, and our
Yeah, that's
hands.
true. That's true. Right.
And without these three senses, one would feel crippled. A lot of our day-to-day activity as human beings involve these three. Of course, with the control and
Yeah. Yeah.
coordination that is done by the brain.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Right. So coming to hands, because I also listen to various podcasts,
Mm.
and with the evolution, I think hand is one of the masterpiece which is considered in the body.
Mm-hmm.
At how it has evolved from the primates, like you mentioned, no, from four-legged to starting on two legs and started able to walk. So as a evolution, why humans have been able to do that? Even you say the monkeys or the primates primarily, why, what lacked in them that they could not come onto 2 feet and walk like us?
So the concept of evolution is often misunderstood.
Hmm.
It is not that one develops characters only in a particular direction. It isn't that way. So you would have random changes that are happening in a population.
Right.
And if that random change provides an advantage to a particular person, automatically their potential to reproduce is far better than a person who does not have that advantage.
Okay.
So the evolution itself from a four-legged creature to a two-legged creature would have also taken place in steps, in very, very gradual steps.
Right.
And in those gradual steps, the ability to be able to be on 2 feet would have provided advantages to those individuals, which allowed for them to reproduce far better than their co-creatures. And that is how a population gets established. And probably this kind of advantages changes is what directs the process of evolution. Like today, uh, the human body has also been sculpted because of multiple changes that are around us. For example, if you just if you go to any natural history museum and you see the pictures and models of prehistoric human beings, you would see that a large number of them would have these large bellies,
Yeah.
protruding bellies, and this kind of protuberant kind of a posture as well. And then suddenly that keeps changing till we have a kind of a flat structure, right? And that is the point where you also see that with animals.
Yeah.
You see that with cows also. They've got these huge bellies.
Mm.
And this huge belly is essentially associated with a raw vegetarian diet
Okay.
because you need a larger length of the gut to be able to digest it, and a large amount of the digestion is actually carried out by bacteria. The moment we discovered the utility of fire and the ability to pre-digest food with the help of fire, the length of the gut does not require to be the same.
Correct.
And therefore, over time, the length of the gut also reduced. The digestive efficiency increased, all thanks to the fire. And therefore, today we have the structure because of something that got invented or discovered during the process of evolution. So it is a two-way traffic. There are random mutations that could be helping you, giving you advantage. And then on top of that, humans have this capability of utilizing technology and industry and intelligence to be able to modify their environment itself.
Correct.
So the environmental engineering has also been able to engineer the human body.
Right.
And something as simple as just a flat tummy is because of a technological invention, and that is fire.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, that's true. Actually, it reminds me when we were studying about out of Africa theory. The same population migrated to different. So some are in plains, some are in mountains. Although they are originated from the same population, but as people were on the higher altitude, their height gradually had to go down so that they are easily, moving around the hills is easy. So that's why people who are on hills, we see the heights are gradually less.
And low oxygen.
And
Low oxygen environment, and therefore the entire population would have modifications that have been created in order to adjust with it. A very simple trait that we see in a lot of the tribal population is a sickle cell trait,
Yeah. True, sir. True.
right?
True.
And the sickle cell trait is something that provided some populations with a survival advantage.
Yes.
And that survival advantage also malaria. Malaria is fatal if it is not treated with adequate
Correct.
Correct. Treatment like quinine, or today there's so many other medicines that are available for malaria, like artemisinin, for which the Nobel Prize was also given. But in the absence of that, an entire population could get wiped out in a forest or in a rural setting just because of one person getting malaria.
Yeah.
And the sickle cell trait prevented the RBCs from getting,
Yeah.
and therefore it still persists in the population even when we do not have a specific advantage of a sickle cell trait.
Right. Actually, I started my research work with this.
Yes.
So I worked on population genetics and the selective pressure of malaria on the northeastern tribal populations.
Okay.
So I was during my work, I came out with some very interesting facts. Hemoglobin, whatever variants we have, northeastern people have hemoglobin E variant.
Hmm.
And because of that, even if their oxygen carrying capacity of the sickle cell bloods are compromised,
Hmm.
they have huge load of the plasmodium. They don't show any symptoms of fever or anything. On the other side, if when I used to go there and collect their samples, they used to give me huge medicines, because if I get cerebral malaria, I think 2.5 days
Yeah.
and I'm done.
Yes, absolutely.
So that was something really fascinating, how nature gives you another way out, that you coexist,
Hmm.
provided you don't have options. So you survive at the same location.
Absolutely. And that is something that a lot of people do not understand about evolution. And therefore, when today they ask as to, has evolution stopped? It hasn't.
No, no.
There are advantages that we get out of different things that we do. And, there was this professor of ours who used to tell us that, there would come a time where the thumb is going to become so prominent because that is what people are using all the time. Whether it be for gaming consoles, whether it be for messaging or anything like that, most of people are just doing this.
Yeah.
And therefore, this hand is going to evolve further. Probably.
Yeah.
The posture also may keep changing.
Mm.
So, for us, the bipedal gait provided us some advantages at some point in time. Today, most of us are sedentary.
Yeah. Yeah.
A large number of people are sedentary. So, there would be changes that may be taking place in the human body that we are not aware of.
True.
But there may be a population that is developing among us, we don't know who has certain advantages which make them more suitable for a sedentary lifestyle maybe.
Okay.
And therefore, they may have a survival advantage having these corporate jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, they may reproduce more than somebody else. And tomorrow, they may get a population that may replace or at least become a prominent population.
Yeah.
Like the entire Neanderthal population, either mixed up with the Homo sapiens sapien population, or they just completely got wiped out. We don't know which. I mean, it's still controversial. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, which is a very fascinating topic.
Yeah.
There was one movie I saw, animation, Wall E.
Mm-hmm.
So they are taking in 2050. There's something futuristic where the Earth is so much polluted that they went into the space and there's a atmospheric bubble inside. And because, as you said, no, the use of limbs have become so limited because of sedentary lifestyle. The limbs have all shrunk.
Yeah.
And only the thumb is working because their most activities of the eyes and like placing orders, for food delivery and all. So with the eyes and the thumb, they're able to do it. So their other parts have become less, but their eyes and fingers have become very.
So those are creative licenses, which is an exaggeration of what evolution actually does.
Ah.
Over the years, it may actually happen. I don't know. It may.
It may,
Yeah.
yeah, right. So then, coming to what I think one of the most talked about, and the one I feel it is one of the most fascinating and beautiful organ, that is brain, right?
Mhm.
And we're all being governed by how the brain is there. People say how you have to wire your brain, the thought process. It's a very complex structure. So a simple, coming to very simple stuff. This pollution in Delhi, does it have effect on the brain health?
Everything and anything can affect the brain health.
Huh?
So something as simple as there is a very fine balance of ions that are there in the environment around the neurons. And that is why the brain is kept isolated in this aquarium of fluid, which is a cerebrospinal fluid, where the ions are so finely balanced so that it does not affect the firing of the neurons, because essentially what happens with the firing of the neurons is based on ionic concentrations: sodium, potassium, calcium, and some amount of chloride and magnesium. But essentially, sodium, potassium, and calcium. These are the most important things. And if the concentration of the sodium, potassium, and calcium around the neurons is off, it can produce a whole lot of damages.
Okay.
And we call them as excitotoxic damages. So if there's too much of calcium or there's too little potassium, because potassium needs to be pumped out while the neuron is getting excited, or there's too much of sodium or too little of chloride, all of these can create imbalances in the brain. Now, how does pollution affect it? Something as simple as the rate of breathing is regulated to about 12 to 20 per minute in a normal adult. The moment our rate of respiration changes, the washout of gases also changes. So, therefore, the concentration of carbon dioxide and oxygen keeps fluctuating. And one of the molecules that is formed with the help of carbon dioxide and helps in the transport of things is bicarbonate. And bicarbonate is kept in balance with chloride, with sodium, potassium, and calcium.
Right.
And the moment your rate of respiration changes, suppose there is too much of pollution and you're not able to breathe properly,
Mm-hmm.
that creates a lot of washout and that can affect the concentrations in the CSF as well. Because it's the same blood that is getting filtered to form the CSF.
Mm.
And multiple methods would be there by which this is a simple physiological method by which pollution can affect you. If your rate of respiration and your asthma happens, or some bronchial infections or bronchial spasm happens, all of that is going to affect your rate of respiration. In addition to that, a lot of these are particulate matters as well as polycarbons and hydrocyclic polycarbons, which can cross the blood-brain barrier. And it still is too early to tell at the level of the population, but there are still a lot of studies that are coming up related to pollution and its effect on lungs and other organs of the body, wherein they have seen the effect of all these chemicals on different organ systems.
Okay.
But the beauty of the brain is that it still has got a lot of reserve, a large amount of it that we don't use.
Okay.
And therefore, we may not be able to appreciate its cognitive effects in the population, but that is not to say that there are no effects.
Okay. Okay.
So, there are people who have linked increasing incidence of Alzheimer's and autism spectrum disorders and so on and so forth with pollution. Now, we don't know. So, the debate happens is because that we don't know as to whether the increase in numbers is actually because of the pollution or is it better detection, early detection, and so on and so forth.
True. True.
So that debate will keep on happening till there is an entire cohort that has been exposed to this kind of an environment. Like in Delhi, if you stay, you can be guaranteed that every end of October to beginning of December, you are going to be in a gas house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably of the level of Nazi Germany.
Wow.
Because that is the level of pollution. In Nazi Germany, gas chambers would be operational only for a few hours and the people would be dead. Here we are in this operational gas chamber for nearly 1.5 months.
Yeah.
Now, what are going to be the effects of that? Probably another generation would be answering that question. Unfortunately, our mistakes are going to be answered and the repercussions are going to be felt by other generations.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. We'll just wait and watch, more or less.
Most probably we won't be there to wait and watch. Somebody else is going to do all the waiting and the watching and the experiences. That is the unfortunate
And the
part.
repercussions.
And the repercussions, absolutely.
Okay. So, as you mentioned, no, the sodium potassium pump and all. So, if we say in a very simple language that if I take more of salt, consume more of salt, that balance can also, like that consumption can also disbalance that sodium potassium salt.
At the brain,
Yeah.
not so much, because there is a very good reserve that is there, and that is the kidney, which helps to maintain the tonicity of the blood.
Okay.
What I was talking about was rapid changes in that happens during breathing.
Yeah.
So simple changes in bicarbonate levels that happen with every breath, that can have long-term effects when it comes to changing in the CSF concentrations, if that is going to be happening at a long-term basis. The fluctuations with breathing. But if you take too much of salt, usually your kidney has an ability to filter it out. If it doesn't, then that is a point where it goes into retention of water and hypertension and so on. And therefore, in a person who has hypertension, we often tell them to avoid high salt diet, like papads and pickles and a lot of preserved and fried foods, which usually have high amounts of salt.
Right. So, why I'm asking this question is because people usually these days go there and they say your sodium potassium is in the blood is not correct, and then we have incidences of fainting, sudden collapsing, and the doctor will say, okay, you are taking like sodium potassium level is not there, so you need to take certain medicine. So that is cannot be, you can say, directly correlated with the brain like signaling and all part.
No. So very often what happens over there is because of dehydration. So there would be very low amount of sodium, and sodium is very important for maintaining blood pressure
Yeah.
and the blood volume. And therefore, the moment it goes down in people who have been dehydrated and so on, one is not able to maintain blood pressure. And blood pressure is, especially in the bipedal animals that we are, is very important to pump that blood into the brain.
Sure.
So that 120 millimeters of mercury from the heart is very important to maintain the circulation of blood in the brain. And that circulation of blood is necessary to provide it glucose, to provide it
Yeah.
oxygen and everything. So the moment the pressure goes down, the brain's perfusion and its ability to get oxygen and blood nutrition also goes down.
Yeah.
And therefore, it kind of starts shutting down. And therefore, it is easier for the person to be forcefully brought down to the horizontal position, because the moment you're in the horizontal position, the blood
Okay.
flow to the brain increases.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the first things that we do when a person faints is to just check for their pulse and their BP to check as to whether they've got low blood pressure.
Okay.
And if they have low blood pressure, just keep them lying down. Never try to lift them up. At the most, if you want to lift a part of their body, lift their legs up, so that will increase the blood flow back to the heart and from the heart to the brain. And they will automatically recover, and give them water to hydrate them. So that will help to maintain the blood volume with a little bit of salt, so that it tastes like tears.
Okay. Sir, when you're talking of brain health, many people discuss now how to keep it healthy with proper, like food. There are superfoods for brain these days, and there people are marketing. Although there are a lot of debates onto it, whether these are actually helping you to improve your. But in simple terms, if I try to understand that if I want to improve my brain health in very simple ways with our lifestyle maybe, or with how I think, like the thought process. So with that, can we maintain a good healthy brain? Is it possible, or it is too difficult a task?
It's a complicated question. I'll answer it in two parts. Okay. First and foremost, about the superfoods and other things that people do take. There is a barrier in the brain which prevents a lot of unnecessary things to cross it and reach and affect the neurons, because I told you the neurons have to be kept in a very tightly controlled environment, and that is why there is a blood brain barrier.
Yeah.
Before that barrier comes itself, we have a digestive barrier, where a lot of these molecules, whether it be complex carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, minerals, all of them need to be broken down into simple molecules before they can be absorbed into the bloodstream.
Right.
A large number of these molecules may not even cross the blood-brain barrier. And if I tell you that a large amount of your brain is just fat and water, that means you should only be taking fat and water to maintain brain health. Now, no one in the world is going to tell you that that is a healthful diet, right? But to maintain the fat in a particular way, you need vitamins and minerals and so on. There's an entire series of B complex vitamins that are important for myelination, other maintenance of the membrane and their potentials and so on and so forth. Similarly, there's some minerals that are important. But that said, brain has its own capacity to maintain itself. And after a while, it starts shutting down as per requirement. For example, you're born with far more neurons than you require.
Yeah.
And it is throughout childhood that there is a process of pruning that takes place, wherein unnecessary neurons are allowed to die, unnecessary connections are allowed to die and get chopped off, get pruned, whereas only those that are adequate for your kind of life are maintained. Whether it be for maintaining your memories, whether it be for maintaining daily type of routine activities, all of them would have a specific pathway that gets activated for functioning. So those are maintained. But after a while, when even those neurons start dying off, that is when we start getting effects like age-related changes in in humans, like Alzheimer's kinds of dementias or Parkinsonism and so on and so forth, where the balance between required maintenance and death that is happening is imbalanced.
Yeah.
And that is when we start becoming symptomatic, because there would be some pathways that die off with those neurons. And that is why it never makes sense to me when people talk of a brain transplant. Because your brain is going to be unique to you and to your purposes of life,
Right. Right.
right? And therefore, your wiring cannot be replaced by somebody else's wiring.
Yeah.
You may be kept alive by that brain, but it is not going to be you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's not even like the ship of Theseus,
Yeah.
where at the end of the day, you don't know as to whether the ship is the original. Because here, your entire thought process is there.
True.
Your wiring, your synapses, and everything that is peculiar to you cannot be replaced by somebody else's.
Right. Right. But can it be deliberately done? Like brain transplant is something, again, it's a topic where many people come across. But can it be deliberately? Like, suppose, just an example, maybe I want to delete some part of the memory from my past. And
Meditation. Yeah,
yeah,
you can do neural engineering for yourself.
yeah,
And that is what a lot of psychotherapy does, right?
does, yeah, yeah.
It is either sublimating some kind of memories into something else, or it's trying to understand that memory in a better way, and so on and so forth. So a lot of neural engineering takes place during psychotherapy.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, sir. I
So
agree.
you don't need to go always on the knife and the fork into your brain
True.
to be able to doing
Okay,
engineering.
but some institutes in India only, they are working on brain chips. So they are actually inserting that external chip into your brain, and then the configurations can be modulated. That's how the process is. So it's for the medical purpose, or it is for, what is the gross objective of doing it? Making a super brain out of it?
Essentially for functional deficits. For example, if there is a motor function deficit, so we have identified areas which can help in motor activity. So putting a chip in a place where there is motor activity, one can help a person to reinitiate motor activity in a person who was paralyzed. Similarly, a person who had brain blindness, wherein the receptors and everything, the retina, the eye receptors and the pathways are fine, but there's a portion of the brain that died off or did not develop properly, and therefore they have a cerebral kind of blindness where they can see objects, they can get all the perception of that object and so on, but they do not see it.
Right.
Because if the brain does not perceive it, it is as good as blindness.
Yeah.
So in such people, the primary visual cortex, again, you can put in a chip to be able to send information according to what is coming from the retina into the secondary areas that can understand what is happening. And therefore, this can help people with that kind of blindness. Similarly, there are implants when it comes to the auditory pathway also, that is for hearing. You can put implants in areas like the inferior colliculus, which is way down in the entire auditory system. But it has helped people who were born deaf, who had a receptor problem in the ear. It never developed properly. And so in such people, these kind of chips can create a bypass from the entire sensory system of the human body, so that it gets the information like a receptor in your phone, and it's able to make it into meaningful signals for the rest of the brain,
Okay.
so that the brain can function and can understand what is happening. So the brain is also that way quite fascinating. Your primary areas, which are either meant for motor function or for hearing or for vision or for sensing things, all of them are tiny. Very, very tiny areas.
Okay.
So the rest of the brain that is actually there, most of the population of the brain, the cells of the brain, are actually meant for integration and understanding what is coming in.
Oh, okay.
For example, the retina, as I told you, has got only 4 types of receptors. You've got color receptors and black and white receptors.
True.
So those are rods, which is meant for shadows and light,
Yeah, yeah.
and cones, which are for red, green, and blue.
Get it.
Just based on these 4 sets of information, which is perceived by the primary visual cortex, you would be able to identify if I look at an apple, I would be able to identify predominantly red. Then it will have curved shadows. So there are neurons that are able to recognize whether there are straight edges or curved edges based on shadows. And shadows are done by rods.
Yeah.
Which is only meant for dark and light.
Yeah.
And dark and light are what produce edges.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And then just based on the pattern that you have in front of you in 3 dimension, which has been perceived by the retina, the brain sends that information to other centers, which tells you that it is an apple.
Yeah.
And the moment it tells you it is an apple, another part of the brain clicks in where you have learned the language for the word apple.
Okay.
And then there is another set of memories that are going to click in that are going to tell you about its taste, its smell, its texture, and also your memories associated with it.
Yeah.
For example, a lot of people have this fascinating idea about apples. I don't. For the simple reason that when we were growing up, whenever we would go to a hospital, one of the commonest things that we would take would be a kilo of apples.
Okay, so you associated
And therefore, apples in my brain has always been associated with hospitals and illnesses.
Oh.
Whereas for me, mangoes and jackfruits are associated with vacations and fun and happiness and, school time, dad getting a whole basket full of mangoes from the mandi, from the wholesale market, and then me just gorging on it during summer vacations. Those memories are far more associated with mangoes and jackfruits rather than apples.
Okay, now I get it. Yeah.
So the brain functions in a very, very, very funny way, but very efficient way. It does a lot of balancing of what is relevant, what is not relevant. And that also helps you to identify what is relevant to you.
Yeah. True.
For example, in this room itself, there are multiple noises that are there. I can hear the beep of a refrigerator that is going on. I can hear there is traffic outside on the ring road.
Yeah.
There will be people who are honking. There are people who are speaking probably in the corridor outside.
True.
But you're not paying attention to that right now. The only person that you're paying attention to right now is me speaking. And similarly, I would be paying attention to what you are saying. And therefore, the ability to subtract all other things is also a possibility in the brain. And therefore, attention in perception is also a function of the brain.
So at the time these signals are present, the brain
It's all there.
capturing.
Everything is captured by your receptors.
But the brain is it's like basically damping those signals
that are not necessary.
that are not necessary.
Yes.
Wow. But with age, these capabilities get compromised.
Yes, because the receptors get compromised. There's a lot of neuronal death that happens with age. And in our lab, we have shown, particularly, we study the auditory pathway. And in our lab, we've shown that the decline actually starts very early. By 20 years of age, the decline has started, though it is not evident. It is not functionally evident because when we do the audiometry of these individuals in the ENT department, there is no functional deficit. That functional deficit starts only after about 50 or 60 years of age. But the decrease in number of neurons from what you were born with starts in the third decade itself, second to third decade. That means by about 13, 14, 15 years of life to about 18 years of life, that decline has started.
So if we take this number, sir, then I think the best time to learn as much as things is the first decade of the life.
It's complicated again. There is a reason probably why this happens is because what we've seen when we compare the hearing losses is that, especially when we compare it with rats and mice, rodents.
Okay.
So our range of hearing is between about 2 decibels to about best about 120 decibels, right?
Actually.
And our frequencies of sounds also that we listen to are of a particular range. And our cochlea, which receives the sound and understands it, is also like a tuning fork which has got different areas which are meant for specific frequencies. So, whereas rodents, our highest range of frequencies is their lowest range of frequency.
Yeah.
And they actually hear in supersonic ranges. And that is why when you hear rodents also, their communication is also squeaking, very high pitched squeaking. And very often we don't even hear it because it is in the supersonic range. It is only when they are speaking in low tones, probably whispering to each other, that we actually get to hear them.
Yeah.
So what we've seen is that the frequency that we humans lose are in our higher ranges. So we lose the ability to hear the higher frequencies of sounds as we start aging. And that is why when we talk to an elderly person who has this kind of a condition, it's actually easier for them to understand if we speak in low tones. So instead of shouting at them at this kind of a voice, especially when they are getting angry with their spouses, does not have any effect. They will not hear you. Whereas if you speak like this slowly and clearly at a low pitch, they may actually be able to hear you better.
Oh, wow.
So when you look at the rodents, they lose their low pitch sounds, which is the same kind of sound frequencies that we are losing.
Correct. Correct.
And their high pitch is maintained.
Yeah.
So we think that probably there is something in the environment, particularly in our day-to-day living environment, which is probably causing this decline, A, to which kids are not exposed to when they're going to school or they're staying at home so much. It's when we start our day-to-day life as members of the earning community
Correct.
that we get exposed more to these kind of sounds. So that is one. And the other is that there are factors in the brain that maintain neurons, what we call them as neurotrophins. And we've seen that neurotrophins also decrease in their expression over time, almost become absent in the hearing system over time. And so the ability for the brain to maintain itself is also gradually brought down. As to whether that is an evolutionary requirement or not, I cannot tell.
Okay. Okay. But is it then, because, brain, we can talk a day, just even less than that. So, but I just read somewhere that we use hardly 1% of our capacity of the brain. And is it true, or it is something from where these numbers have come and how people have claiming this?
These are allegorical exaggerations.
Like people say Einstein used the maximum part of his brain and that is why he was a genius and all. So there's some scientific evidence behind these claims?
Not really. Today, with fMRIs and with functional PETs, we are able to see at least areas of the brain that light up with activities. And you see that, there are diffuse and discrete areas of the brain that will light up with different kinds of activities. Those experiments are very difficult to carry out for the simple reason that it's very difficult to create a situation where a person is only thinking about one thing. It's easier to do it with animals in controlled conditions, but with humans, it is really, really difficult. And therefore, there's a lot of noise in that data as well. But what is very evident is that even for a simple activity like picking up a pen from somewhere or thinking of a flower, it won't be just one area of the brain that lights up. There'll be multiple areas of the brain that will actually light up. So this kind of allegorical or anecdotal numbers that come up that 1% of the brain only is utilized is probably exaggerations based on old electrode based functional studies where you stimulate only one small part of the brain which for moving the index finger, and the index
Correct.
finger moved, and therefore you think that a person who's sitting and only typing on a computer is probably only using that part of the motor cortex. No, it is not true. Even for you being able to type on that motor cortex, there's so many parts of the brain that are going to be involved, that is going to send final signals to the motor cortex to say, okay, do this. And this is the sequence in which you're supposed to be going and doing it. So I do not agree with this kind of an exaggeration, because all of us, even in day-to-day life, like even what we are doing right now, having this conversation, there would be so many parts of the brain that are lighting up right now. So many.
True, sir.
Something as simple as your ability to maintain the tone of voice that you have and the tune that we have when we speak in a particular language is also a function of the brain.
Yeah, yeah.
And your ability to recognize my tone as to whether I'm angry or sad or happy and all is also a function of the brain.
Yeah, yeah. True.
So every time we are engaging ourselves with something or the other, there are multiple parts of the brain, even sitting quietly and thinking, the multiple parts of the brain that are going to be engaged.
But usually when we are angry or when we are like little bit hyper, our obviously the tone increases, right? So that's a natural trend of the human body, or is it like deliberately like you have to put emphasis onto the word to the person you're talking to? You have to raise your voice and show that dominance. So it's a behavioral trait, or it's somehow the brain actually
It's an evolutionary trait.
it's evolutionary trait. Oh,
So if you speak in a high pitch and or high frequency sound and with high amplitude, what are you trying to convey?
that I am dominant over you, maybe, or I am more powerful than you in simple words.
So if you are in a forest,
Hmm.
what would that entail?
Okay, okay. That I am the fierce one here, and you should be afraid of
So
me.
if you are facing a predator, there are two responses. You either flee,
Yeah.
or you protect yourself. And your ability to produce this high pitched loud sound would scare the other person.
Yeah, yeah.
And it will also travel much further than a low pitched soft sound. And therefore, it also alerts your community
Okay,
about a clear and present danger.
right.
So, your anger is technically a very wild trait that we have
Yeah.
that has come from the forest and the need for survival in the forest. Unfortunately, a lot of people have not been brushed by the strokes of civilization, and therefore they do give in to these bouts of wildlife.
Yeah, true, true. Even coming to that evolution part again. So, I read somewhere, we're always like, suppose you hear some information and you vaguely heard it. You always think something wrong has happened first. So usually in families, oh, there's somebody is traveling in the middle of the forest. You know that person is traveling, and when you reach out to him, are you all right? Has anything happened? So there's always an alarm, as well as you and anticipate that something wrong is happening. So is it something because, like I read somewhere earlier, we used to we sleep on the branches of the tree, and the brain used to be always overprotective, that when there's a chances of you may fall down and all, and there's always predators, as you said. So its alarm system is in such a way that always danger it anticipates, and then it keeps you always ready. So that is still there, or
Still, absolutely. The primary purpose of this entire system is to protect you. It's always to protect you. The most important reason why we have pain is for what? It's an alert system to damage. The moment there is any damage, there will be pain. And it is not a macho quality or something to be able to bear pain. Your body is telling you there is a problem. Please deal with it.
yeah, yeah,
The same thing is with these kind of situations where your if there is an imagery of the forest and you think that there are dangers or any imagery associated with danger, Your body and your brain, the first purpose is self-preservation. And therefore, it is important to be alert. You are not going to be strolling in the night in the middle of the forest just for fun. No, your brain is going to be on super alert mode because you know that, okay, your vision is not going to be optimally functional. Your hearing is going to be affected by so many other things that are surrounding you. You're not in familiar grounds and so on and so forth. And therefore, you will be on super alert mode.
Correct.
That is protective. The primary purpose of everything around you is to protect you,
Protect you.
is to help you survive.
Yeah, true, true. Then how important is sleep, sir, in that context? Like to maintain, we always say if you sleep well, most of your brain health will be taken care of by that. So good sleep is an indicator of a good brain health?
Uh, Good sleep, there are people, again, it's a tough question because, again, you get a lot of these anecdotal things like 8 hours of sleep per day, and people consider that as the gospel truth. Unfortunately, a lot of research and studies is anchored by statistics.
Yeah, yeah.
And therefore, when somebody says 8 hours, that means it is usually the average requirement in a population. There is going to be a minima, there is going to be a maxima, and there is going to be the normal distribution of that data always,
True, true.
right? So, some people may feel refreshed, adequately refreshed and functional after 4 hours of sleep. Some people may not do that even after 12 hours of sleep.
Okay, okay.
So you need to find your method of and your requirement of sleep that is essential for you to feel refreshed and in optimal functioning.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And that sleep is very important because that is also the time when the brain starts pruning a lot of unnecessary things. So a lot of stuff happens while you're sleeping.
Yeah,
And so the brain is not sleeping. It
yeah.
is doing a lot of work during that time. And it also allows the rest of the body also to recuperate. And therefore, it is important that you have refreshing sleep.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But these days we have this mobile culture, no? So you always have to scroll before you go to bed, and then that has an impact on the sleep as well.
It does, for the simple reason that important thing that maintains your sleep is the level of melatonin. Melatonin is secreted by the pineal gland, and this pineal gland has got direct relationship with the retina, that is light stimulus.
Okay.
And therefore, switching off the light is important for the pineal to kick in and release melatonin to help you sleep.
Okay.
And therefore, not having adequate darkness
Mm.
can affect the cycle of the release of melatonin. And that is why when people have jet lag, one of the prescription medicine is melatonin, which helps them to increase the amount of melatonin to get them to sleep.
Okay.
So melatonin has been therapeutic in people with jet lag and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But the essential thing is that after a point, you need to cut off the light, because when you cut off the light, then the pineal kicks in and secretes melatonin to help you sleep, calms the rest of the brain.
So trained. Thank you for your time, and then I have no other words to express my gratitude for your time. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, sir.